My name is Jeanette De La Rosa Ducut, and I will share how to create training following sound educational theory. So by the end of this course, what you should be able to do is apply backwards design when creating instructional materials. Before we begin on how to design your training, what you want to do is certainly separate this concept of what training is from education. And what may you ask is the difference between training and education? Well, one, being training is intended often to transmit skill, whereas education is intended to develop higher level knowledge, whereas training tries to describe how to do something. It's education that intends to explain why something is the way it is. So for example, for a pilot to learn how to fly an airplane, he may go to flight training school. But an aeronautical engineer may want to attend an educational institution to figure out why an airplane flies. Another example about the difference between training and education is learning how to drive. When I learned how to drive, I attended a driver's education course to understand the rules of the road, to figure out why it was so important to comply with the laws that were laid out for me. But that was different than actually learning how to operate a motor vehicle, which is something that you do in driver training school. And in my last example, if you would, imagine that you were a parent. And if you were a parent who had a daughter, and that daughter one day told you that she attended school to take sex education, where she perhaps learned about biology and the birthing process and perhaps a little bit of physiology, that would have been one thing. But if your daughter came back from school and told you that she attended sex training, that would have been quite a bit different. So then there lies a difference between training and education. And they aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. In fact, they certainly inform each other. You use a bit of education during a training course and vice versa. So I share this difference because when we're talking about creating training, we really want to focus on developing skills and focus less on explaining and inundating people with information as to why something may be the way it is. Because when it comes to a training class, people may not necessarily remember everything, but certainly what you want to get out of them is this development of a new skill that changes their behavior. So you can design your training by following a very simple 3-step process that were created by these educators known as Grant Wiggins and Jay McTeague, who said that if you follow this process of first identifying desired results, second determining acceptable evidence of your achievement of your desired results, and then third, developing content around the assessment that is hopefully tied to an objective. If you follow this 3-step process, you will have created a training that is focused intently on developing skill. So let's talk about some examples. Again, step 1 is to, before you begin developing your instruction, identify your desired results. What is it that you want people to learn by the end of your course? And often, if you use this very simple fill-in-the-blank sentence, you will have created a very good objective to guide the rest of your instruction. And the sentence is, by the end of this course, you should be able to, and then answer that question with the verbs that describe the skill that you would like people to attain. An educator known as Benjamin Bloom said that there are different levels of objectives or verbs that you can use when you're identifying the desired result. You can use lower levels of objectives, such as having people remember something, having people perhaps apply something, and even having people understand something. But those are lower level objectives. they really don't result in anything except what is known as rote learning, in essence, remembering something. So try to use higher level objectives, such as the term analyze or evaluate. Or even better, create. These verbs tend to uncover higher level learning because people aren't just recalling information, they're actually synthesizing it and doing something with it, often to create something new. So after you identify the objectives or what you want people to learn at the end of your course, this is when you next should create an assessment or a measurable way of determining whether your objectives have been met. You can do this in one of three ways. The traditional way is to come up with perhaps a test. And in the test, you ask a series of questions to identify people's successful completion of an objective. You can either do a test or you can do direct observation using perhaps a performance checklist to see if somebody has attained a skill, or neither a test nor a direct observation. You can use perhaps a report or a work sample or some kind of a record review to determine whether somebody has successfully achieved your objective. In my example, I'm going to use a test. So if I were to create an assessment that looks like a test around my objectives, I would have for each objective an assessment question, a test question. It can be the who, what, when, where, why, and how types of questions. And for each question, if it's a test question and if it's a multiple choice question, you want to provide options for answers, at least 4 within a multiple choice kind of a question. We can provide a true or false question, which is another form of multiple choice question. The most effective types of questions you can ask are open-ended questions, which take a little bit more time to analyze for correct answers, but they are the most effective. So what in essence I'm doing is I am creating an assessment question in my test for every single objective I've identified as the desired result that I want to attain at the end of my course. So for every objective, I have a test question. And then, and only then, should I begin the last step, which is to plan learning experiences, or to outline what is it that I'm going to teach in the course. So whether it's a Microsoft PowerPoint slide, whether it's a handout, a book, or an online training course, you want to begin outlining your course only after you've identified what your assessment was going to be, and if after you've created the objectives for your course. So for example, if in my course I wanted people to analyze something and I was going to talk about analyzing something represented by the symbol X, I then should provide in my outline or in my content information about X, but more particularly the information that represents the answer to the assessment I wish them to achieve that is tied to my objective, and so forth. Similar to some content related to what is represented by the symbol Y, I want to make sure that if I have an assessment question related to Y, I've identified in my outline of my content that answer to that subject related to Y, and so forth. So what you're doing is you're planning your instruction around measurable objectives that are described in an assessment. And that is how you apply backwards design when developing instruction.